It is Monday, August 3rd, 2020, and this is your Tropical Storm Isaias update as of the 11 o'clock advisory here on Monday morning. 11 a.m. says we're at 70 miles per hour in terms of our sustained wind, so no real changes from the earlier this morning advisories. The only kind of difference is the overall speed. The forward movement has picked up a little bit. We're moving north now at 13 miles per hour, 70 mile per hour sustained winds, and pressures at 998. The satellite presentation on this is not as impressive as it was about 12 hours ago. We had some intense convection. It was concentrated around the center, and then it looks like some dry air was mixed into the overall circulation as it's trying to lift off towards the north. You see the earlier satellite images here had the yellows or the whites and reds there and the blacks, and that indicates cold cloud tops, intense thunderstorm activity. The last couple of frames there, not so much. It's also getting a little bit elongated and stretched out. If you see this feature here off towards the north and west, that's a decaying frontal boundary, and that's swinging down to the south and east. What's going to happen here is that's going to help spread out the rain shield, and also the wind effects will be over a larger area as it gains latitude here in the next 12 to 24 hours. Hurricane Hunter's out into the storm as well, and they also indicate a pressure rise, a weakening of the storm, and if it is going to strengthen at all, it is a very small window to do so, probably within the next 12 hours or even sooner than that, as it's moving over some very warm waters. But you can see the dry air is once again being a problem. The yellows are indicating the dry air on the water vapor imagery here, and looks like some is actually getting pulled in to the overall circulation. But as I mentioned, as it heads towards landfall somewhere to the north-northeast of Charleston, South Carolina, we could see potential brief intensification back up to a Category 1 hurricane because of the immense amount of very warm sea surface temperatures there in the mid-80s currently. If we look at satellite imagery again and show you the wind speeds at along the coastline, so far, with the system being tilted and offset from its low-level center, that's a little bit farther to the west of where all the convection has been. That's also where all the strongest winds are located. So if you see some of the gusts popping up here, they're on the order of 20 to 25 miles an hour. We are picking up on some buoys offshore that are clocking winds close to tropical storm force, but at least for now, which is a good thing, the strongest winds and the heaviest precipitation has been offshore. But you can see that's about to change. As this is lifting north, the heavier rain bands, which is also embedded with some strong winds, will be pivoting onshore near Charleston, South Carolina, and even out through Savannah. And as this makes its way off to the north-northeast and potentially landfall somewhere here to the northeast of Charleston, South Carolina, all this is going to lift inland. Here's the official forecast as of 11 o'clock this morning from the Hurricane Center. Again, wind sustained at 70 with gusts up to around 85 or so. A brief burst of intensification is possible up to a minor Category 1 hurricane with winds of 75. But as this moves inland, we're going to be on the right side of the storm system, and that means some of the strongest winds and heaviest of the rain here are going to be in eastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia. And even as it heads inland through the Delmarva up through New Jersey and eventually into New York, you're talking a large stretch of the East Coast going to be under some damaging wind threats. Now I want to show you here the kind of diameter in terms of the strongest winds. Right now is the 11 o'clock advisory. The winds do stretch out from the center of tropical storm force 39 miles per hour or greater, about 100 miles from the center to the north and east. You see this kind of like oblong shape here. And then you got the 58 mile an hour winds in that orange shading. And briefly, as it heads towards landfall, it's a strength into a hurricane. So you have a very narrow window here of hurricane force winds, which is 74 miles per hour or greater. It loses that characteristic as it interacts with land, but still a very large wind shield here as it heads into eastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia, and even keeping those strong winds as it heads into southern New England and eventually up towards the Canadian border. We have a lot of watches and warnings up right now, pretty much just to the north of Daytona Beach in Florida, and then tropical storm watches stretch all the way up to Bangor, Maine, and even inland to the Canadian border. So the majority of the eastern seaboard is under some sort of tropical alert. Now, on top of this, you have the spin initiated in the atmosphere from this tropical system, and as it interacts with land, the friction causing some eddies, some swirls in the atmosphere, and that leads to the potential of severe weather or rotating thunderstorms that could lead to brief spin-ups of tornadoes. Storm Prediction Center has a 5-level system for indicating the severity of the potential outbreak, and this is right now at a level 2. So it's rather low, but it is there, and is always something to keep in mind when you're tracking a landfalling tropical system. That might be something to really keep an eye on for tomorrow as it makes landfall. Also, we have alerts for storm surge. In the pinks, the lighter pink shading, storm surge watch, and the darker pink, storm surge warning. And that's for the persistent south to southeasterly flow that's onshore, and that is going to pile up water in low-lying areas. Potential inundation values of 3 to 5 feet in your landfall, 2 to 4 feet a little farther to the north and east, and farther north out through the Chesapeake Bay and through the Delmarva, around 1 to 3 feet potentially of inundation above sea level. So let's talk about the models now. We've seen remarkable consistency here, at least over the last couple of days. The clustering of these models on top of each other, with the exception of one single outlier that's a little farther to the south and east there, but good consistency, saying a landfall somewhere along the North Carolina, South Carolina line along the coast, and then building inland, kind of tracking just inland of the coastline for the next couple of days as it heads north. Also, the GFS ensemble, all the members here pretty much piled right on top of each other, and only very little spread as it heads towards the north. Remarkable consistency as it heads towards the Canadian border. Let's compare the GFS and the European models now. We'll look at the yellows, which is GFS. The red bullseyes here are going to be the European. Those lines are isobars, lines of equal pressure. When they're close together, very sharp gradient, very sharp wind field, and strong winds indicating a stronger storm. You can see it heading inland here. Pretty good consistency of where it is going for landfall to the northeast of Charleston. And then there are some timing differences here as we get farther out down the timeline. GFS is a little bit faster. Euro kind of lingers to the southwest a little bit longer, but overall the same general track. That's not the only system we're watching. We're watching Invest 94L, still way out in the Atlantic, but odds are pretty decent over the next 5 days, about 60% that it could acquire enough characteristics to get our next name, which would be Josephine. That's the latest here on Isaias. Is now tropical storm, could briefly strengthen to a Category 1 hurricane before landfall later on this evening. If you want to find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we'll have more updates through the rest of the day.